Let's talk about something that is of relevance for all and every one of us. I think that polarization and polarized societies is one of the most discussed topics of our time right now. And talking about polarization, you have to go back to a very old concept that came to my mind and into my way like 15 years ago. And I think some of you may recall that. It's called the digital divide. The digital divide basically describes a situation where there's people with access to information and tools and technologies, and then there's a situation where people don't have that access, and that has consequences. Looking into the consequences and connecting that with polarization that we see, one has to state that the digital divide is more real than ever before, even though we don't discuss that anymore. We see that massive wealth is being created with the Elon Musk of this world, Jeff Bezos, to just name a few. 15 people at WhatsApp sold the company for a 2-digit billion amount of dollars. That is clearly the consequence of being in the nose and being on the right side of technology. On the other hand side, what we're seeing in discussions with unions, in discussions with organizations of people that are actually marginalized, there is now the working poor on the other hand side of the digital divide. We see the people every single day that sit on their bicycles and get us Volt food at the doorstep. The ones that sit in logistic trucks at DHL that bring our packages from Zalando and the likes. So there is people losing from the digital divide, and the polarization is driven massively by digitalization. And that is true for our tech system, that is true for knowledge, that is true for education, and that is true for a lot of building blocks of what we call our society. Most recently, a pandemic showed us to what degree and under what lens the digital divide could actually get us. What we've seen is a situation where blue and white collar workers were massively divided, even the numbers of infection rates being different alongside the jobs to choose, the privileges to have, and the interaction that had to be happen. One hand side, and that would more be likely for the white collar workers, was really freed from going to the job, going to offices. They were enabled to sit at home and buying stuff at Obi, which massively scaled during that phase. So the liberating force and power of what is digital has actually applied for them to a very positive degree, even though we were in the midst of a pandemic. We understood that digital is contributing our productiveness and our freedom. On the other hand side, mainly the US had to learn that the hard way. We saw that all the workers that are involved with care work, that are involved in hospitals, and that are actually serving us as the driver on Wolt, Lieferando, as the Zalando driver in logistics, they were the ones to take the pain and to work below the API, whereas I, and you guys most likely, worked above the API and were basically defining the rules for the ones that got lost behind. Talking about value creation from a more general perspective and leaving the pandemic behind, what we're seeing is with that concept of above the API value creation, below the API value creation, that actually the few that are in the nose are more and more becoming set into the situation where access determines value creation. Even on stock markets, what we're seeing is knowledge is basically translating into value creation. When it comes down to startup investments, knowledge is driving value creation. And when it comes down to network and being networked, knowledge translates into value creation. The ones that are not part of those networks, and we call that bubbles, are excluded from value creation and are the ones that actually drive around your Flink, your Volt, your Gorillas, and the likes. And we're proactively building barriers around value creation in order to exclude them. And that becomes more and more true the further digitization drives into economy on the one hand side and societal ecosystems and infrastructure on the other hand side. So imagine if digital literacy really is the matter to determine whether you're rich or very poor. And we're seeing algorithms basically fostering that differentiation. that you'll not be able, if you're on the end of the receiving, so poor people, you'll not be able to overcome the bubbles being built up and entering networks. So access is basically determining value creation, and the value creation that is behind the curtain on the greener side of things is bigger than ever before, and it's basically tax-free, as we know. The hope that we're all focusing on right now and looking into, quite obviously, is education. As education has always helped solving problems in the past. The sad story is, if you start talking with teachers, what you understand is that teaching teachers is broken, basically. So people that go to university with a dear heart that want to be and want to become a teacher basically recognize that the education of teachers is not digital at all. Literacy is not educated at teachers' level, so how could the teachers possibly educate pupil in digital literacy? Looking into the specific German situation, we call it federalism, we have the situation that we still believe that algebra in Saxony should be taught differently than algebra in Baden-Württemberg, which makes no sense and which moving forward will be an even bigger problem when teaching digital literacy, when teaching the understanding of media, when teaching future literacy, and when teaching things that really matter, like coding, in a world that is defined by code and defined by algorithms. So what we're not creating, and what we're still not creating, and that is really threatening me, is literacy on any kind of level, and literacy that will help to overcome the digital divide. Who is in a privileged situation to be parents of people and make the decision over that can basically go into private school system. And we're sitting in Berlin right now here, and the Berlin Metropolitan School would be kind of the symbol for that. So there is education being offered that basically teaches capabilities of now and capabilities that will make a difference in the future. But it is actually not accessible because private schools are given away at least some money and free slots for people that want to go and don't pay are basically determining the rooster. The public school system is not picking up, so we're at the level of small kids driving further digital divide as we go. The world is going to be more complex than now. Talking about ethical algorithms, talking about algorithmic decision-making, talking about bias of the algorithm, all of that needs understanding of the algorithm actually making decisions. Who is not in the knows about algorithms taking decisions and why and how you basically get a O2 telecom contract or not because of your scoring system, that needs understanding of why you're treated wrong. So what we're seeing is basically a society that now gets educated in an old system and then gets left behind in a new system. What is going to happen is they're easier to steer, they're easier to control, and no one is going to push back on whatever algorithmic control we might be seeing. And I'm not talking about China here. I'm talking about the power of commercial markets that are in a situation where they find controllable customers more interesting than customers that are actually in control. Elections that will happen in the US, that is the perfect storm, and I'm worried about democracy. Democracy only works if all of the people win, and we're not talking about a zero-sum game. If too many people lose in moments of massive value creation, that is what we call digitalization. The situation is polarized, the situation is not governmental anymore, and we're going to see moments of illiberal democracy arising. So I think that the time to solve that problem is right now, and we need to think about solutions. Looking into solutions that sit there and that are on the horizon, payment and fair payment quite obviously is the first step to take. We need to pay the people better that we dearly need to care for other people. We need to pay for human behavior in a digitized world, and I'm talking about elderly care and the situation that we saw across the hospitals. And yes, the people in Aachen, in Köln, and the other university hospitals are still on strike. What we then need to do is really have an understanding of taxation that needs to change. where we, in the kind of starting phase of capitalism and industrialization, taxed the ones that had machines. We now have to understand that capital is as liquid as ever before, and we need to understand that taxation needs to sit on value creation, not on profit. So Elon Musk basically has a tax rate of 0% because he's basically not earning anything, just only his Tesla stocks go up and up the whole time. Why is he not paying tax for that? There is value being created and we need tax to be deducted from that. We need to reinvent education. That is quite obviously the case, and we need to do it now. The federal system that we have in Germany is not going to help us, but overcoming that is pretty improbable, since we need to have a constitution change in order to make that happen. So it is about alignment, it is about agreement, and it's about the understanding that digital literacy needs to be part of the education and the curriculum, and so does programming need to be a part of that. Talking about society and awareness of that, questions around ethical AI, around selection bias, and around the way we let technology rule the way we live together need to be on the table. And yes, we need laws to govern the use of AI and the output of AI. And then it's actually pretty easy integrating our society, even in a pre-digital mean, really bringing care back to the table and bringing mutual understanding back to the table is key to what we need to do, because otherwise the digital divide at some point is over-polarizing us, and that is not going to lead to a society that longer will be able to coexist. So please let us work on overcoming the digital divide even 20 years later. Thank you.